Hello, Graham from ArionGames here, and today I want to talk to you about something a little bit different. I've done a few AFF videos recently, but today I want to talk to you about game design. So this is something a lot on my mind at the moment. I'm preparing for and planning for a games writing workshop to be held here in November. I'm going to be doing another video about that shortly. Only a few places. So if you are interested, you can visit the website and I'll put a link in the text with the video. And what I want to talk to you about today is the idea of a focused versus a toolkit game. So I've written quite a few games now, and they tend to fall into two categories, as indeed do many games that are out there and that are published. So on the one hand, we have something, for example, Stellar Adventures, and other games I've written do fall into that category. Stellar Adventures is very much a toolkit game. With this book, you could play a Mad Max campaign. You could play Star Trek, you could do Star Wars, StarCraft, Warhammer 40,000, etc. Any sort of sci-fi RPG. And it's not just about flexibility. The book was written with a whole range of game styles in mind. So I put in robots. Now you don't really have robots in Mad Max, but I put in mutants, and you don't really have mutants in, say, Star Wars. And I've put power armor in, which you don't have in Star Wars, but you do have in Warhammer 40,000. And I've got different types of psionics. I've got one which is very much the Force. I've got one which is academic. Psionics, very much inspired by Traveller. I've got another one that allows you to literally link to a ship and control it, which is sort of almost a Farscape-ish type style. And so when I wrote Stellar Adventures, I put lots of options in to allow you to do this type of game or this type of game. So you've got trading rules, but you've got exploration rules, and you've got crew rules, and you've got etc, etc. So you can do anything from post-apocalyptic up to sort of utopian sci-fi. Now, of course, that is great because it gives you options. It means if you pick up a copy of Stellar Adventures, you can play lots of different types of games with it. Great, fantastic. But there is also a problem with that, because if you pick up a copy of Stellar Adventures, sometimes the range of options can be so vast, you say, what do I do with this game? And that in itself can be a problem, especially, and this is not being patronising, but especially for newer gamers. If, for example, you're one of the rather large cadre of newer gamers who started with D&D 5th edition, which is fantastic, it's a great game. But you start with D&D 5th edition, and you then want to move on to other games, you want to experience other games. And you happen to see this in a game shop, you pick it up, you think, oh, fantastic. And you read it, you think, well, what do I do? Do we do trading, or do we do Rebels Against the Evil Empire, or do we do exploration, or do we do what? I'm lost, and that can be a problem. So the other type of game that is produced is a very focused game. Now, I'm using Maelstrom Doomsday here, but again there are several others I've written that could follow that mould. So in Maelstrom Doomsday, this is a hyper-focused game. You are a supernatural investigator for a Norman lord in York or area in 1086. So it has defined who you are, what you do, where it is, and when it is. So this is a very, very, very focused game. Now, that's not to say you couldn't pick up a copy of Maelstrom Doomsday and run Cadfael inspired murder mysteries. Of course you can. You can do Crusades with it. You could do an early medieval. You could do Battle of Hastings. You could do Saxons versus Normans. You could do Saxons versus Danes. You could do all of those with it, with very, very, very little adaptation. But the game is written with a very, very specific premise in mind. If you use the book as I wrote it, I was about to say that as intended, but that's not quite true. I'll come back to that. If you use the book as I wrote it, you do one very specific thing for it, and it does that very, very well. Whereas with Stellar Adventures, I wrote it with the idea of doing anything. Now again, these both have advantages. Now what I said there about using it as I intended it, I intended this to be a book where you are the supernatural investigator. That's what it was written for. That's the whole premise of the game. But it is also fantastic speaking to people and hearing from people who have used it for other things. Because when it comes down to it, it's your game, you have fun. But I think when it comes down to focused versus toolkit games, they both have advantages, they both have disadvantages. One of the reasons I put a focus into Doomsday was in the original Maelstrom, set in the 16th century. It is a fantastic game, it's a fantastic rule set. But the most common complaint I hear about the original version of the game was, what do? You create this group, this party of an architect and a mercenary and a beggar and, you know, a butcher. What do you do? Well, how do you bring those together? What adventures do they have? What do they do? The architect isn't going to necessarily want to do the same thing as the mercenary is. And so bringing those together into a coherent campaign is quite important. And that's something that the original book never really gave a lot of advice on. And you do see a lot in reviews of games where people say, I wish the author had put some actual play in here, or a sample adventure or something like that, to give us an idea of what the author intended me to do with this game. Because the rules and what you do with them are often two separate things. These rules are broad, you can do lots. These rules are quite focused. And so these when you pick up Doomsday, you are in no doubt of the, if you like, the optimal campaign that these rules are written for. But when you pick up this, you think, wow, I can do X, Y, and Z with this easily. And so I think it's important almost to categorize games into, certainly in your own head. I'm not advocating, you know, an official list of this, but in your own head, separate games into very much the toolkit games and the focused. And I think if you do that, it then helps you in a way focus the toolkit games. Because if you see how a specific game goes, we do this, it helps you do it with a broad set of rules. Equally, if you're familiar with broad sets of rules, it helps you take a focus game and say, well, actually, I could do this, this, or this with it. And so I think it's good to experience both types of games, to play both types of games, to run both types of games, so that you can make the most of both types. And when it comes down to it, enjoy them all. And really, this is a game design theory. Now, obviously, you may never be writing games. You may be writing homebrews. You may be writing and publishing. All of these are great. But I think if you are writing anything, it's good to keep these two broad categories in mind, because they will very much inform the decisions you make when you write the mechanics. And I may well come back to this actually in a later video of how the mechanics can drive one of these two book styles. Anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it from today. I will be doing a video on the Games Writing Workshop, but if you're interested, just get in contact, leave a comment, visit the website. Otherwise, good gaming until next time.